You are watching the biggest sporting event in the world right now. Billions of people, billions of dollars, flags everywhere, and the country hosting all of it is about to get a bill they were never shown before they said yes. Every nation that has ever hosted the World Cup has paid a price most people never find out about. Stadiums that cost $1 billion to build, now used as parking lots. Entire cities restructured for tourists who came for 3 weeks and left. Countries that borrowed to build, still paying it back a decade later. This is not a theory. This is what happened every single time. And the US just signed up for the same deal. Let me tell you about a stadium in Manaus, Brazil. It sits in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. Getting there required cutting a road through jungle that probably should not have a road through it. The stadium itself cost $300 million to construct. It seats 44,000 people. It hosted 4 World Cup matches in 2014. And then the tournament ended and everybody went home. Manaus does not have a professional football club in Brazil's top division. It never did. The city had no use for a 44,000-seat stadium before the World Cup came to town. It had no use for one after. Today, Arena Amazonia is used partly as a bus depot. That is not a metaphor. That is a building that cost $300 million and now has city buses parked in it. And that stadium is not even the worst example from 2014. It is just the most photogenic one. Brazil spent somewhere between $13 and $15 billion hosting the 2014 World Cup. The number shifts depending on who is doing the counting and which costs they are willing to include. What is not disputed is what was happening outside the stadiums while the games were being played. Brazilians were in the streets, massive demonstrations in every host city, signs that read FIFA Go Home. Hundreds of thousands of people furious that their government had spent billions on football infrastructure while hospitals were running out of basic supplies and school buildings were literally collapsing. The Brazilian government had made promises before any of this started. The World Cup would pay for itself. Tourism revenue would flood in, jobs would be created, the economy would receive a boost that would justify every single real spent. The economists came back with their findings a few years later. The tourism numbers were real. They were just much smaller than projected. The jobs were temporary. The stadiums in cities without football cultures sat empty. The infrastructure built specifically for the tournament served the tournament and almost nothing else. FIFA left Brazil with approximately $4 billion in profit. That profit did not stay in Brazil. Here is how the World Cup actually works financially. Not the version in the promotional materials, the real version. FIFA is technically classified as a non-profit organization. What it operates as in practice is one of the most efficient revenue extraction machines in the history of professional sport. The 2022 World Cup in Qatar generated $7.5 billion in revenue for FIFA. The 2026 edition is projected to exceed that number significantly. But FIFA does not build stadiums. FIFA does not build airports, or hotels, or metro lines, or the temporary media villages that go up around every host city. FIFA does not pay for the tens of thousands of security personnel required to run the event. FIFA does not pay for the logistics, the coordinations, or the years of preparation that precede the opening ceremony. The host country pays for all of that, and it goes further than that. Host countries are typically required to sign agreements that exempt FIFA and all of its commercial partners from paying local taxes on income generated during the tournament. Every FIFA sponsor, every broadcaster, every partner operating on host soil during the event gets a tax exemption. On billions of dollars of income generated in your country, on infrastructure built with your money, by workers paid with your money. The host country cannot touch any of it. This is the structure that every host nation agrees to before a single foundation is poured, before a single contract is signed with a construction company, before a single government official stands in front of a camera and tells their population what a historic opportunity this is. They all agree to it, every single time. For 100 years, South Africa hosted in 2010, the first African nation ever to do so. The national pride surrounding that moment was genuine, and it was enormous. They built 5 new stadiums and renovated 5 more. The Cape Town Stadium alone cost approximately $600 million. It was constructed on prime waterfront land, with a view of Table Mountain behind it. The setting was stunning. After the tournament ended, the South African government spent years struggling to find anyone who wanted to use it. The stadium had been designed around the needs of a World Cup, not around the needs of the city or the domestic football league. Maintenance costs ran to millions of dollars per year. The Cape Town city government negotiated with event promoters just to keep the bills covered. Cape Town Stadium has hosted concerts. It has hosted smaller events. It has sat empty for long stretches. South Africa's domestic football league does not produce crowds that fill a 60,000-seat stadium on a regular basis. It never did. The stadium was not built for South African football. It was built for 4 weeks of football that the rest of the world was watching. South Africa is still maintaining it. Russia hosted in 2018. Total reported cost, approximately $14 billion. 12 stadiums were built or renovated. Several of them were placed in cities with no meaningful football culture because FIFA's requirements for host venues meant cities needed to be spread across the country's geography, regardless of whether the local population had any relationship with the sport. Saransk received a 44,000-seat stadium. Saransk is a city of roughly 300,000 people. Their local football team competes in the lower divisions of the Russian football pyramid. The stadium was built to host 4 group stage matches and essentially nothing else of comparable scale. The economic analysis that followed found that the projected surge in tourism spending and lasting investment had been substantially overstated. The visitors came for the tournament and left with it. The temporary economic activity did not convert into anything durable. The stadiums remain. The maintenance costs remain. The World Cup has been gone for years. But here is the part nobody talks about when the bids are being made. FIFA commissions economic impact reports before every tournament. These reports project enormous returns, tourism revenue running into the billions, job creation across multiple sectors. Infrastructure built for the event that will serve the host country for decades afterward. The reports are detailed. They are produced by credentialed professionals. They are presented to governments and to the public as evidence that this is a sound investment. They are almost always wrong. A significant and growing body of independent economic research from institutions including the International Monetary Fund and from economists who specialize specifically in sports mega events has consistently found that the projected benefits fail to materialize at anything close to the promised levels. The tourism gains are real but modest. The jobs created are temporary. The infrastructure built primarily to satisfy FIFA's requirements rather than local needs often becomes a financial liability the moment the tournament ends. Economist Andrew Zimbalist spent years studying the economics of hosting major sporting events and concluded that no host country has ever been able to demonstrate a net positive economic return from a World Cup when all costs are fully and honestly accounted for. Not one. In 100 years of tournaments. Qatar 2022 was the logical conclusion of the entire pattern. A country with a citizen population of around 300,000 people spent somewhere between $220 and $300 billion hosting a World Cup. The number is so large it barely registers as a real figure. For context, Brazil's $15 billion spend had been considered scandalous. Qatar spent roughly 15 times that. The human cost ran alongside the financial one. The stadiums and infrastructure Qatar needed were built almost entirely by migrant workers from Nepal, India, Bangladesh, and several other countries. Investigations by journalists and international labor researchers documented deaths in the thousands, wage theft, passport confiscation, and working conditions that multiple human rights organizations characterized as forced labor. FIFA had awarded Qatar the hosting rights in 2010. That vote later became the subject of corruption investigations that resulted in criminal charges against multiple FIFA officials. Money had moved in directions it should not have moved. Qatar got its World Cup. FIFA generated $7.5 billion. The workers who built what made that possible mostly went home. Which brings you to right now. The United States, Canada, and Mexico are hosting the 2026 World Cup together. 16 host cities. The largest World Cup in history, expanded to 48 teams. The financial investment is already substantial, and the tournament is still underway. MetLife Stadium in New Jersey will host the final. SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. AT&T Stadium in Dallas. Venues across 3 countries, most of them already existing infrastructure, adapted rather than built from scratch. The economic projections are considerable. Billions in expected tourism revenue. A global audience watching American cities on the largest possible stage. And some of that will be real. The United States is not Manaus. American cities have the infrastructure. The stadiums were mostly already standing. The hospitality industry operates at a scale that can absorb a major international tournament without breaking. The economic disruption will not look like a bus depot in the Amazon jungle or a 60,000-seat stadium with nobody to fill it. But FIFA's financial model is the exact same model it has always used. The tax arrangements are the same. The commercial agreements are the same. The direction the money flows is the same. FIFA's projected revenue from 2026 exceeds $11 billion. The majority of that revenue will not stay in the United States. It will not stay in Canada. It will not stay in Mexico. It will go where it has always gone. So why does any country say yes? The honest answer is the same answer it has always been. Political leaders want the image, the moment of standing on a stage accepting a golden envelope from a FIFA official in front of cameras that broadcast to the entire world. That moment is worth something to a government. It generates the kind of national pride and collective feeling that is genuinely difficult to manufacture through any other means. It wins votes. It makes legacies. The costs arrive later, after the ceremony, after the final whistle, after the officials who signed the hosting agreements have moved on to whatever comes next in their careers. The people who make the decision are rarely the people who live with the consequences. That structure has repeated itself across 100 years and dozens of host nations without fundamental change. The celebration is real. The football is real. The shared feeling of watching something enormous with the rest of humanity is real. And the bill is real too. It just arrives quietly, years later, as stadium maintenance line items and infrastructure debt and economic analyses that nobody schedules a press conference to discuss. FIFA understood this long before the host countries did. That is exactly why the model has never changed. Right now, somewhere in one of the 16 host cities, a game is being played. The stadium is full. The cameras are running. Billions of people are watching. And in an office somewhere, a spreadsheet is being updated. The numbers on FIFA's side are going up. The host country will find out what their numbers look like in a few years. They always do.